Welcome to More Than Making It, a podcast where real people share real stories of overcoming challenges. Brought to you by Making It on My Own, where we empower young adults for life. Whether you're a young adult or a parent, you're in the right place. Get ready for insightful stories, expert advice, and practical tips to help you more than make it in life and parenting. Let's dive in.
I quit gymnastics when I was 16. If we looked back, none of us would have thought we'd get to where we are right now.
Hey everyone, welcome to the More Than Making It podcast. I am here with Elisa Harley. Hello, Elisa.
Hi, how's it going?
Very good, very good. Just a quick introduction. Elisa, when she was year 12, she created a company called Anivo Pots, which won the Wellington Young Enterprise Scheme regionals, and then she went on to, I think, place third in the country and was the one to watch in the awards. And then she did it again the next year. So just really inspired on this podcast to speak to everyday young people from New Zealand that has really given it a go. So Elisa, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Hey, Elisa, why don't we start by sort of going back a little bit? Obviously, you're all over LinkedIn. You've been on the news. You've been on articles, but I think it's good to start like early on. Like, were you always growing up an entrepreneur? Were you always inventing stuff? Like, tell us a little bit more about yourself when you were a little bit younger.
Yeah, so definitely it's gotten quite big now, but it didn't start big at all. I wouldn't say that I was like inventing things, but I was kind of just, I guess I showed early signs of the entrepreneurial mindset just with kind of how I was living. So I used to be a rhythmic gymnast, and part of that we would travel to compete across the country. And so I was like, it's like talking to my parents, I was like, I've got a competition in Tauranga. How am I going to get there? And they were like, I don't know, how are you going to get there? And so I had purchased a succulent and then found out that you could actually multiply them and propagate them. And so that turned into my first little business where I sold and made $300 at my local fair selling these cute little potted succulents. And without even knowing it, that was kind of the beginning of entrepreneurship for me. And then I did that again for another year, some more succulents, and then made even more money, sold more succulents. I was like, great, what's next? And so then I ventured into selling and growing native plants. Something I thought that was once again going to be a quite small project, which escalated quite quick. So I just borrowed some seeds from around my neighborhood. But then I talked to some people about it, and then they gave me a lot more seeds, and suddenly we had 2,000 native plants
2,000
in our sunroom. And my parents weren't too keen. I'd turn our like sunroom, which was where my mum liked to go and like read her book, and suddenly it was like a like a greenhouse in our house, and I had like all these little plant cells all set up. And then they were growing, and then they're like, "What are you going to do about it?" And I was like, "I'm going to build a greenhouse." And so COVID
How old were
came.
you, Elisa, at that time?
I think this must be 2020. Oh, 2020, because it's lockdown.
Right.
We went into COVID lockdown. So I'm in year 9 at this point. So I had designed I was slightly off task in my design class. And instead of designing stickers, designed my greenhouse. Went to Mitre 10, gave the guy my drawings, and he said, come pick up the receipt tomorrow, and it will be delivered to your house. And then COVID lockdown happened, so me and my dad built this greenhouse, which was 2.8 meters by 2.5 meters, so twice the size of a little of an elevator, and grew these plants, sold them for 2 years, and then was like, I've got quite a lot of plastic pots everywhere.
Wow.
And then found that's a nationwide issue.
Wow.
And now here we are.
Here we are. So I've got so many questions about that, because that's such a concise summary of that. Let me just ask a couple of questions. So like I guess in COVID, some people learned how to bake. Some people went out for lots of walks by themselves
Yeah.
with their bubble. And you just started like propagating thousands of plants in your house. How did, like, have you always been into planting stuff or like
Yeah.
what got you, apart from the fact that you need to raise some funds for your
Mm,
gymnastics,
mm.
like why would you, why plants? Why thousands?
Yeah, so I don't think I was necessarily attracted to plants specifically, but I really liked very much enjoyed the process of bringing my products to this local market that happened every year, the Waytown Fair, and I planned it all out. And like 8 months before the fair or more, I would get all the succulents, split them all up, have them nicely in rows. I took out all the vegetables from our vegetable garden, much to my mother's delight. I was like, "Hey, we don't use this. It looks kind of scunchy. I'm getting rid of it." And I cleared it out, and then had all these little rows of succulents. Um, and then I really enjoyed that process of looking after like my crops, and then
Mm,
2 months before the fair going to the warehouse buying all these beautiful little pots, and then now I'm transferring them into these little pots, giving them 2 months to kind of get used to the pot, and then taking them down to the fair, having my little float writing down how many coins I had to begin with, how many $5 notes my parents lent me, and then writing down all the orders. I loved interacting with customers at
mm,
the fair, especially because I was there for a cause with
yeah.
my gymnastics competitions, and I got to talk to them about that, and they were like,
Mm,
"Wow, that's so cool! You're taking this initiative." Um, and then because I liked that process
mm,
of like the growing, bringing the product to market, if you can call it that, that's when I guess I was like, well, what's next? Native plants. That's all. It's like a seed that I
mm,
see around
mm,
around my neighborhood. Let me grow the seed.
mm,
And the first ones all died, and then I got to talk to some people, and they gave me new native seeds. I got some Kakavik and dwarf Corfi
mm,
seeds. And then during lockdown, I was like, this is a great time for me just to kind of work on this project. And my brain was already like, without me even realizing it, it enjoyed the process of creating a product, working out how much it
mm,
cost to make and how
mm.
much I was going to sell it for, and asking people, how much would you buy this for? In comparison to how much I need to pay for my gym costs.
Mm. And where did you end up selling these thousands of it? Obviously not to individual households. They probably need one or
No.
two.
Yeah, so the native plants I did them 2 years at the fair, but also actually, I think I posted it on a Facebook group or something, and then they told me to go to like the local Mitre tent, and I think it was because so I worked quite closely with them to build my greenhouse, and they were like quite interested in this project. Like we saw this teenage girl just before she went into lockdown with this drawing, and then she decided to pay $1,000 to get all these wood supplies. I wonder how that greenhouse is going. And so
Hmm.
over lockdown, we were emailing the guy with progress photos, asking questions. And then I was like, hey, like I've got some plants. And so we got to sell them to Mitre 10 and also to a local plant nursery. So that was a cool process where I felt like a supplier to like a big corporate company. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. And all of this started when you were about 13 years old. For context, year nine is around 13, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. And do you come from a business family? Like, because sometimes people go, "Oh yeah, that person's a business person because they just inherited the billion-dollar business from the parents." And obviously that's not your story. But do your parents do business?
I was asked to at a conference, and I immediately said no. My parents are very risk averse, and everyone laughed at me. And I was like, "Oh, I should phrase that differently." But no, so my parents are not in business at all, um, and I don't think they've ever had their own business. That's business was not something we talked about at home. Um, but they, I guess, are like good problem solvers within
Hmm.
their current positions. And when they saw me, like curious about my project, they were like, we're going to let this curiosity keep going. We'll provide any advice as we can. But it was kind of just like the entrepreneurial mindset. It's kind of just something that people like, if you have it, it's just kind of there, you know?
Mm,
And
Mm-mm.
it was just something that I cared about, and my parents were there to help drive all my plants to the fair and back, you know?
I suppose, when a young person comes up with an idea, it can be tempting for the parents to kind of write it off and go,
Mm,
that's just a kid having some random thoughts, right? So
mm.
the tell us more about the support that you've received from your parents. Like, were they laughing at your idea, or were they like, oh, it's a bit too big, or is it a bit mixture of both? Like, how did your parents approach this whole entrepreneurial thing?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, obviously, if we looked back, none of us would have thought we'd get to where we are right now with the business and everything. But it started small. So
Mm,
my parents have been so supportive and involved, especially in the most recent year as things got really big and I was under 18 and I didn't know how to understand a 20-page non-disclosure agreements and collaborations and things. So my parents got very involved then. But like I know people who would say to me like, "Oh, I couldn't do what you do because my parents would never trust me with deciding to launch this whole big thing." And what I would say is that I didn't just puff this out of nothing
yeah.
because it started small. My parents
Mm,
were like, "Hey, look, if you want to dig up the veggie garden and sell succulents,
go for
go
it.
for it," you know? Because there were worse things I could have been doing, especially like in lockdown. I was getting outside into the garden and I think although they didn't like do business, they definitely understood the value of
Mm,
me learning how money worked, me working to try and pay for these gymnastics competitions myself,
mm,
and me kind of self-leading a project that I was interested in.
yep.
And because I saw the value in that, because it's those skills are so
Mm,
important to have.
mm, mm,
And the younger you can start practically working them
mm,
out, even if it doesn't work, is the better, I would say.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, they just were there all the time, providing answering my questions. But yeah, and then it just slowly kind of increased. And there's definitely times when it was like, okay, this sounds like this is gonna be the end of the project, it's not gonna go any further. But then
Yeah.
I would like email one extra person and they'd be like, I can offer you this. And then now
Wow.
we're on to the next step. And it's like, oh, this is possible. I'll contact you with this person and here's some funding. And now it's like, my parents are
Mm,
like, okay, next step, I guess now.
yeah.
Um, but yeah.
So I guess that as you said, they saw that you were faithful with the little things,
Mm,
and they didn't do it for you because sometimes parents can kind of, be like the person that does everything and applies for scholarships and
yeah.
attends interviews for their kids and so they literally they allowed you to do
Yeah.
little things and they saw that you gave it a go and they stepped in when you needed help and then I guess that gave them the trust, for parents that are listening to this podcast, to
Yeah.
that gradually they increase their trust and support for you as you begin on that journey. Hey,
Yeah. I'd honestly say they were pretty hands off, but what they offered me, which was what I needed, was just that like curiosity and that interest in what I was doing.
yeah,
They would ask me how it was going. They'd say, Elisa, have you watered your plants? Um, and they just kept that interest with me, which made me feel like what I was doing was interesting and
ah,
worth continuing. But they didn't run things for me. Elisa, the fair's in 2 weeks. Have you organized your float?
yeah,
But they
yeah,
weren't out here doing things for me. And especially in my first year with the Nevo pots, which I'm sure we'll talk about a bit more later,
yeah,
they were they were there as that supportive person, but
mm,
I kind of manned that business myself and we kind
yeah,
of freeballed it for a year, which I got very lucky that it worked out the way it did. But it
yeah.
was in last year, 2024, where they really came in and supported me more when we had the collaborations and partnerships.
Yeah, it's amazing in the last couple of years following your progress. You've got grant funding, you've worked with government scientists on prototypes, you've
Yeah.
presented multiple times at forestry conferences. I want to hear more about these things shortly, but before we get to that, like the obviously you're being a competitive athlete. You said you were competing as a gymnast. Did you find any crossover traits or experiences from your gymnastics that helped you or is still helping you with what you're doing now?
I was thinking about this just before our call, actually, um, because gymnastics me would have never thought this is where I would be. But I think it was a mixture of like the striving for success and knowing that if I put in the work, I could achieve it.
Hmm.
Gymnastics, I did rhythmic gymnastics, which is a very competitive sport. And it's the idea that you'll train 13 hours a week for your 1 minute 20 routine, you know? And so it's like, it's all about like, it's about the like the work, not the showcase at the end. It's
Hmm.
about the journey, the progress, not the little display. Um, and that was, I think, something that I see in business now. It's not about the award show at the end of the year, whether I get the trophy or not. It's about the hours I've put in over the year and what's grown and what challenges I've overcome. And I think the fact that that mindset I had from gymnastics, that I wasn't striving for the medals per se, but it was about the journey.
Hmm.
I see that and now I understand that in business. Um, but also I think just like the being okay with being uncomfortable. I'll push
Hmm.
myself when I'm in uncomfortable positions,
Hmm.
because I know that like I can push through. So when I
Hmm.
was so nervous before my first TV like interview, but or like I should have been so nervous per
Hmm.
se, but I wasn't because I knew that I was
Hmm.
actually. It's kind of fun to be in that uncomfortable new position, and I actually can do it.
Hmm.
And I think definitely those mindsets, and the discipline have
Hmm.
definitely carried over and
Hmm.
are definitely a big help.
Yeah, I think, as you said, where sports can provide you those situations of struggle, and
Mm,
if you understand what it feels like to push through difficult things, then you can
yeah.
kind of take that transferable skill across to different industries, eh? So that's cool. That's really cool. So how old are you now? If it's impolite for me to ask, then say so.
I am 18 years old.
Yeah.
My first year of study. I've just moved to Christchurch from
Yeah.
Wellington.
Awesome.
It's been a month and 6 days since I've been here.
Wow. So you're
Yeah.
living the independent hostel flatting
I
lifestyle. Tell us a
I
bit more about that.
am. I am loving it here. So I'm at the University of Canterbury studying industrial product design, and I'm living in a hall, but the type of hall that I'm living in is the island apartments. So it's like these all of these flats. There's like 800 kids in these flats. Um, and so I've got 5 people, 2 boys, 3 girls, and I love it so much because it means I don't have to like stay in my room. I can go study or hang out in our living room, in our kitchen. I am self-catered, so
Mm.
I'm cooking for myself, which I am loving. Cooking is something that really relaxes me, and is really fun to do. And I love doing my grocery shop, writing out my budget. I'm eating really good at the moment because my friends' whole food can be quite questionable.
Yeah.
And so I'm really glad that like they're all like looking at like what I'm eating and they're all jealous.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm just living my best life. We've got a bread maker,
Yeah.
so we've been making bread.
Ooh.
My flatmate made a blueberry brioche focaccia
Oh,
last
get out of town.
night. We made brioche cinnamon rolls, olive focaccia. We make our own yogurt as well with like a easy
What?
yo. And so I just feel like I'm living like my best life, really.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Providing for myself.
You're adulting and
I
you're
am
loving it.
adulting.
Yeah. I mean, you've been through a lot in the last 2 to 3 years and a lot of growth, a lot of maturity. Um, and when you think back to when you were about 16 years old in school, 2 years, maybe 15, 16,
Mhm.
like what's the difference between Elisa at 15, 16 at Wellington Girls,
Mhm.
to Elisa today? Like, I know that's a big question, but
Yeah.
like, yeah, talk to us a little bit about that.
Elisa at 15, 16 would be shocked at Elisa now. Um, I I mean, I was kind of just chilling, but I had a lot of just, I didn't have anything firm that I was kind of living my life off. I don't really know what I was doing. I was kind of just like, I was kind of there. And um, I was pretty good at school. Um, but I didn't know what that meant. Like I was like, okay, I'm gonna go study three sciences, two maths. That was kind of it. But I'm really glad I had business kind of come in at that point afterwards because I know that it didn't work out that that was for me. Academics was not the thing that I enjoyed being good at, and so I didn't put much effort into it. I was the girl who slept through classes. It was not for me. And if I hadn't had business, I just would have thought that I was kind of nothing.
Yeah.
Um, and so business for me came at a really crucial time because I was also kind of struggling with like just some like slightly toxic thought patterns from gymnastics because
Mm.
because that was the main thing. I quit gymnastics when I was 16,
Oh,
15,
right. Talk
16.
to us about that.
And so that was hard because as anyone knows who's been doing a high intensity sport for I did it for 6 years and I was coaching for 4 years. So it was a huge part of my life and then I quit because of injuries. Well, I pushed through my injuries as long as I could and then I couldn't after the second nationals. Um those were my friends. And so then I was like, well, what do I do now?
Mm.
And that put me in a little spiral of not knowing what to do. And I was kind of like trying to like who do I become? So I kind of became obsessed with productivity. This was me in my academic era. And I was like running every day. And then I burnt out, which was
Mm.
fun. And then I had to extract absolutely everything from my schedule to like properly like reset, which is obviously quite a hard thing to do as a 16-year-old. Have everything pretty much taken away from you because your body and your mind needs that reset and rest, which is why I was sleeping through my classes because I was waking up at 6 to go for a morning walk and then read and
Mm.
then do my studies and whatever. And so that was something which the productivity was something I clung to because I thought I had to be something because I was like, well, I'm not a
Mm.
gymnast anymore. Let me cling to this. But then I found my love of business again.
Mm.
Um, the idea I loved thinking of solutions for problems, like creating
Mm.
all these solutions. And then I didn't know that that was like a possible career path or something
Mm.
I could do within high school other than just like my plants.
Mm.
And when the Young Enterprise Scheme came into my school,
Mm.
I always have to plug them because they've changed my life.
Yes.
But Young Enterprise Scheme is a nationwide high school competition for young people, and you get into teams or you go solo, which is what I did. You find a problem in your daily life, could be something super small, could be something huge, and then the Young Enterprise Scheme provides you a curriculum either within your school or outside of school, and it just helps coach you to create a business. So many people walk away making $10, $500, $5,000, or making a loss. But regardless of how much money you made, the things people learn and the experiences of the people you
Mm.
meet changes everybody's life who does Young Enterprise. So I got the privilege that it came into my school and I jumped into that, yes. And then through that, I learned and I grew. And then I've become a very different person now.
Wow. I mean, yeah, Young Enterprise, a quick plug from me too. I was involved with it a
Yes,
long
you
time ago.
were a
And
long time ago.
yes, yes. And so completely support that. And I think it simulates the real world for young people within the confines of safety as well, where you're not out there with the sharks trying to start a business. So I
No.
absolutely recommend that to anyone. And like
Mm,
what you've just shared really is a concise summary of some high highs and some really low lows. And
mm,
obviously, from the sounds of it, we get the lights, we get the headlines, but then I guess the journey is not linear, right? Like it's
mm.
you've had to go through some mountaintops and some valleys on the way, and I'm sure there's more to come as well.
Yeah, no, and I'm very glad you've asked that question because I was thinking about it once again just before this
Mm.
call about the fact that I've in the past 2 years done so much and I'm like, I don't know how this will happen, but I want to tell people about it. But I don't
Yeah,
want people to look at me and be like, oh my gosh, she's done all this. How
yeah,
could she have done it? Because I think about me when I was 15, 16, struggling with like intense burnout, was lost because I just quit my sport. Um, was kind of all over the place in teenage emotions.
Mm.
And she became me.
Yeah.
She didn't immediately become me,
Yeah.
but slowly.
Yeah.
And so I want to encourage people that
Mm.
really anybody,
Yeah.
like this is possible for other people and more, far more,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. No, that's great. And I think that that's an important message for people to see and hear behind the scenes, and hence why this podcast, we want to bring people that are, more than making it and have been through journeys and still on that journey. So thank you for coming on this podcast. Now,
No worries.
what were you like, I guess, when you first started all of this, when you first had that little business, um did you have a long range vision, or were you literally in sports playing the ball that's in front of you, and then and
Yeah.
then taking the next step? Like how big picture are you, and how like narrow right in front of you are you, right?
I'm quite a big picture person. And I think because of what my business is, I had to be a big picture thinker. So I probably should explain to people what the business is.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Talk
so
about that.
my business is Anivo Pots, and it's biodegradable plant pots made from New Zealand forestry and primary industry waste, which is a bit of a mouthful, but basically, pretty much, we like to plant trees in New Zealand. We plant lots of them, but a lot of the trees are coming in plastic pots or plastic bags, and you cannot easily reuse them because the plastic pot can pick up some harmful soils and diseases, which can then spread, and it takes a lot of water and time to wash a pot. So they just throw them into the landfill. And so MPI estimates that we use 350 million plastic pots every single year in New Zealand alone. Um, and that's millions of kilos of plastic waste. And so my business is a biodegradable plant pot. The plant, before it gets sold off in the tens of thousands to go be in a big planting project, you put the plant into this biopot, it gets sold in the biopot, and then the whole plant and pot goes into the ground. You don't have to do anything with the pot, it's just there. But
Mm.
the thing is with making something like a biodegradable plant pot, think about like making a paper cup. You need a factory to make this paper cup worth selling or like affordable to do anything with.
Right.
And so I immediately, especially because we were looking at using at the time forestry slash, which we didn't realize how kind of messy of a raw product that is.
Mm.
So we straight up in like our first 2 weeks of starting this business, I had two friends at the time doing it with me.
Mm.
Um, we're told that we needed $3.5 million for the factory to process the material, which then had to go to another factory to be produced.
Wow.
So we were immediately thinking big numbers, big picture. I knew this was something that it's not like a soap you can make in your kitchen.
Yeah.
This is immediately big. And I'm an ambitious girl. So I was like, hey, let me go for it, you know? And so met the people, had to bite the bullet and make a prototype in my kitchen just to prove that it worked.
Yeah.
But then yeah, it slowly got bigger from there. But definitely we were having to start thinking big picture
Mm.
to see that because the concept only works at a large scale.
Yeah.
It doesn't work on a small scale. And so for me it was setting the vision, the goal, the
Mm.
vision being to have a forestry industry which isn't producing millions of kilos of plastic waste.
Mm.
And to do that, that required a big scale solution. And then from there, what are our small steps to get there?
In business, they always talk about you find a need and meet that need, right? You find a problem and try
Mm-hmm.
to solve it. So it sounds like that's what you did. And you were saying earlier that you had all these you're propagating these plants, and then you found all these plastic little pots left over,
Mm-hmm.
and you realized there was a lot of waste. Now, the original idea, how did that come up? Like, did you have a dream, or did you kind of talk to some people, or where? Like, surely it must have come from somewhere. You saw the
Yeah,
problem,
so
but how did you come up with the solution?
So it was actually in 2022. I was doing one of the Girl Boss um Edge online courses, which I'm not sure if you heard of,
Mm,
probably. But it so she's a Yes alumni actually, Young Enterprise alumni, Alexia.
mm,
And basically she created this business, this platform for young girls because she was the only girl in her like I think it was her like digital science class or
mm,
something. And she was the only girl, and she was like, "Why am I the only girl?" And so she created this platform where basically girls between a certain age, I can't quite remember.
mm,
It's now like it's a 10-day course online, I'm pretty sure, and it's like different niches. So there's like finance ones, sustainability ones, healthcare ones, and you go and you like get mentored and go through some coursework and get a cool drink bottle at the end. But the one I did was about primary industries. And so one of the challenges, it literally was one of the categories was forestry. And I was talking to my uncle about it. He had just helped me. He's been helping me plant all these native trees. And we had lots of plastic pots.
mm.
And he's also involved in forestry because anyone goes on a road trip in New Zealand, you've driven past some forestry slash. And I think we were driving past it at the time or something. And I was like, I need a forestry business idea.
Mm.
And he's like, well, we've just spent how long planting trees for you? And he does lots of quite big, he organizes big planting projects. He's like, you know what's a problem with planting? He's like, you think your house is a mess with 2,000 trees. Imagine how much of a mess the big nurseries are, the big farms are when they're planting tens of thousands of
Wow.
trees. And so I was like, well, what if we use forestry to
Mm,
make a biodegradable plant pot? So the idea I came up with my uncle in the Bay of Plenty. And then that was 2022, January. And then nothing really happened with it. I submitted it, nothing happened. Did the same idea with a cash flow girl boss course in July, was a finalist with it. And I was like,
mm.
guys, this is a winning idea. Like I had thought into it more. I was like, this is obvious. Like we're in New Zealand. Why are we importing plastic pots and
Yeah.
then leaving them around? And I found out by talking by people who plant them, the plastic pots blow away and people just leave them. He's like, yeah, and I'm not going to run after the plastic pot if it blows away. I was like, oh, so there's plastic waste just everywhere in this whole
Yeah.
situation. But I was like, it's an obvious solution, and so I was committed to doing it. And then Young Enterprise came along, and it was like, I've got the idea, the problem, the solution, and I've got this access to all these resources. Let's make it happen.
Mm. Wow. It's amazing how along the journey, different people were at the right place and the
A
right
hundred
time to
percent.
provide seeds, so-called, no pun intended, of thought for you to
Yeah,
to
yeah,
run
yeah.
with. Yeah,
Hmm.
so that's really cool. I'm very intrigued. Tell us a little bit about the I guess the big world that you've started to enter into, like the adult world. You talking to scientists,
Yeah.
you're talking to grant people, you're presenting at conferences. Tell us a little bit about that because I just to preface it, my understanding could be a wrong
Mhm.
understanding. My understanding is these industries are very specialist. They're
Yeah.
very niche, and often it's older people, much older people, and quite male dominated. That's my impression. So, like, tell us about what you've experienced and what it's been like, and how did you actually, yeah, enter that as a 17, 18-year-old girl?
Exactly my question. Male dominated, older generation, decades of
Mm,
academic experience and industry experience and academic research. And then there's me
mm.
at 16 being like, I have an idea. I need $3 million. So it was definitely interesting. But I guess once you've got the young enterprise name, is that something you're doing, people automatically will have a conversation with you. So
Yeah.
that's what I did. I asked and had initial conversations. I didn't immediately get on stage and present. I talked to some people. The first people I talked to laughed and told me I need $3.5 million and it's not going to work. But then at the end of the call, because they saw that I was, like, oh, this girl seems quite excited about this idea. We can't be the people to tell her no. And they got me connected with somebody else, and that somebody else turned out to be Scion, which is a Crown Forestry Research Institute based in Rotorua. Basically, they're doing a bunch of cool stuff with wood or any biomaterials, just creating really cool things. And had some Zoom calls with them about this idea. And, people are really willing to help out or just have initial conversations or catch up for coffee with young people who are interested in things, especially I think in this industry, because we were talking about before, there's not too much connection with the younger generation, the older
Right.
generation in this kind of forestry, primary industry sector. So these guys were really willing to have a chat with me. Had a few calls about it because I didn't get overwhelmed when they told me the scale of it. I was like, great, let me get to planning. And I was like, can we arrange another call this time next week? And then those calls happened. I had quite a few calls with the Scion team, multiple of them, one of the general managers, um, or he's a portfolio lead, and then some of the pulp experts, the chemical experts. And then they were like, actually, come see the space. And so I went up to Rotorua with my dad. He dropped me there, and I went for a tour of all of these cool labs. And they were like, you know what? This could work. And I don't really quite remember how it happened, but that would have been in the middle of 2023. So I was in the middle of my business. And I was, I don't even know, I was doing quite well with Young Enterprise in the competitions. I was quite good at pitching the story and the vision. I think because in business, your pitches will always
Mm.
already be a step ahead if you're here to help people help the planet and if you're
Right.
passionate about that. And so because
Mm.
the judges quite like that, and so I was doing quite well with the competition. And so I was like, well, I just have to keep planning my next steps for Young Enterprise. And
Mm.
then I applied for some grant funding.
Mm.
And um, that was really what unlocked actual momentum with Scion because I applied for my first grant, AgMat, which also I randomly met a lady at a woman in business breakfast who told me about AgMat, which is another example of right person, right time.
Mm.
And I got my first grant of $19,880.
Oh.
4 days after my Young Enterprise Nationals, which I came out third out of 1,000 teams, I believe.
Mm.
As well as winning the Primary Industry National Excellence Award and the Innovation
Mm.
National Excellence Award. Second, I was runner-up to the Sustainability Award. And
Mm.
so now I had this kind of media coverage as well.
Mm.
And had my, and then 4 days later got the grant, which Scion matched with
Mm.
some in-kind funding.
Yep.
And so then a week later, I flew up to Rotorua and we had pots. Um, oh, we had trays because we didn't have a mold yet. Then did some testing in nurseries. Um, and then designed a new mold in my
Right.
class,
Yeah.
new pots, new field trial. And then that was kind of the cycle. It was me taking small steps and going, well, what's the next thing? And when I think all these industry people saw that I was putting in the work behind the scenes and I was grateful for their time, I always thanked them.
Yeah.
I always gave them credit where credit was due in my media
Yeah.
experiences. Then they just were happy to help,
Mm.
asking a nursery, hey, can you put 10 of my trays in the corner somewhere, chuck some cheap plant in it, and just see if it grows. If it dies, I'll come back in 2 months and take a photo, you
Yeah.
know? And I think that attitude is what got me really far. Because after my nationals, I had no product yet.
Mm.
People saw something on LinkedIn. Hey, like you seem like a lovely person. I spoke on stage and in front of 500 people at the nationals. They could see I could present. Do you want to come present at my conference? 500 people? Sure, sign me up. I'll be there. And then somebody saw my profile that I was going to speak at this conference, and he was like, "Hey, can you come speak at my conference too?" And I was the only female. There was maybe 20 presenters. They were all males, Pakeha, over the age of like 30,
Mm. Mm.
and presented at a conference into a room of 250 people. And they said I was one of the best speakers.
Mm.
And it was just about that confidence that I knew I was doing something good for people on the planet. I believed in the product that it was going to work, and I was putting in the work behind the scenes.
Mm.
People saw that. I was like, hey, come talk about it. And I happily did. And then I
Wow.
got two more grants since then.
Yeah.
And yeah, here we are.
That's amazing. I mean, like how hearing your story, it sounded like there were moments where people kind of go, you'll need 3 million. There's always barriers. There's
Mhm.
always like, you know, reality, right? And so, and each time it struck me that you kind of didn't, you weren't taking backward steps. You were kind of like, okay, well, let's find another way, type of thing. And
Yeah.
how how do you develop that? Because like a lot of people would come across these situations and they'll just go, okay, well, I'll go do something else. Or they'll feel
Mm,
a sense of imposter syndrome, like I don't deserve to
mm,
be here because everyone's different to me. They're older, they're
yeah.
smarter, they got more experience. Like, were you
Mm,
born like this, or did you like? I mean, because some people might go, well, that's good for Elisa because that she's just like
mm,
that, and there's an element of personality to it, but also
mm.
was there something that you had to like build towards as well?
I think it's definitely an attitude thing because people, whether they believe it will work or not, they will adjust their answer based on how much they believe in you as a person.
Mm,
So that's one thing which I've come across a lot. People say that even without the business, people would invest in me as a person because of my attitude. But once again, as you were saying, this attitude, like what attitude, you know? And it was that because I don't like networking. I get really stressed out networking. We had a networking event yesterday, and I was like, oh. But one thing one of the girls on the panel said yesterday was that never feel like you don't deserve to be in a room. Like if you're in that room, you deserve to be there. And that's something I wish I knew because I definitely struggle with that a lot, especially being a 16-year-old girl in a forestry conference full of men, you know? And I was like, what am I doing here? And I
mm,
just wanted to go home. I was like, I don't have anyone to talk to. People think I'm like, people have asked me if I was there to volunteer, like if I was part of the events crew or like the catering crew. And I'm like, no, I'm here to speak. And it was
drop the
like, how
mic.
do I like, yeah, no, but I was like, how do I like process this in my brain? And, you know, I think when people it was more like the attitude going into all these Zoom calls when I was like, hey, I want to do this. And they were like, and if they said, like, they didn't, like, the first call, they didn't think it was possible, but because they saw that I had, like, maybe like this ignorance about me, but like, I was hopeful that I
Yeah,
could create something that would help this issue. They're
right.
not going to shut you down because teenagers are, I think people think that teenagers are like losing interest in like doing good. Some of us are because when we do have that excitement, we get shut down about it.
Mm,
But I think people are slowly starting to recognize that they need to not shut down that excitement, depending on who you meet. The people who know what's up know that they shouldn't be shutting that down. So
yeah,
these people are like, hey, you know, we'll connect you to someone else. And so I think that's what I got lucky with. I never really got people who told me no. I
right.
got people who said, try this or this
Mm,
person instead.
mm,
But also, once I had enough kind of people that were secure to me under my belt,
mm,
um, I didn't take like if somebody criticized me or my business and said it didn't work, I wouldn't listen because I
mm.
had my support people who
Right,
believed in me.
right.
And this was another thing they talked about yesterday was recognizing when criticism comes from a place of love or a place of jealousy. And also
Wow.
just like so I my personal mentor says that she in her life only has three people she accepts criticism from.
Mm,
Like just like by standard, you know? There's people in like this business where they are my advisors, not like officially, but they're people who've been pouring into this business externally and I will take their advice on board.
mm,
Like but then outsiders that I haven't really built a connection with, if they something, I'll listen to it. I will filter whether I take
yeah.
this on or not. And if it doesn't align with what I've been working on for the past 2 years, I'm not going to go be like, actually, you told me it doesn't work. Maybe it just won't. Let me just quit, you know? Because I've put in the work. I've got the industry leaders around me. And
Mm,
so there's always people who are going to tell you it's not going to work. There's always people who laugh at me and go
mm,
like, oh, that's cute. But
mm.
I don't need to listen to that because I know from the people that I've built around me that
Yeah.
it will.
What an important message that it sounded like you have that you draw confidence from the fact that over the years you've built a team around you of people
Mm,
that you can rely on and people that know their stuff that believe in you. And I guess for those who are listening to this podcast, if you're a
mm,
parent or if you're a business person or a person just with good experience in any field, I guess what Elisa's saying is that if a young person comes up to you with an idea, do your best to encourage them and to believe
a
in them,
hundred
you
percent.
know, and because you just never know how far they can go because I'm really excited about Gen Z and Alpha coming through,
Mm,
and media is always focusing on the negative. The narrative is so negative about Gen Z, and but I beg to differ. I see all the
a hundred
positives,
percent.
and I just believe that Gen Z literally is changing the world and can if more people would support them. So I sense that you're not only in Gen Z, but you're quite connected to your generation and understanding what
Mm.
your generation's like. So could you talk to us a little bit about like your views about the strengths, some of the strengths and some of the weaknesses of your generation?
Oh
Big
gosh,
question.
big question, big
Huge question.
question. I think there's also a difference between the fact that there's our generation, Gen Z, but then we're also just teenagers as well,
Yeah,
you know? Because like Gen Z in 10 years' time is gonna look very different to us now because
right.
we're Gen Z and we're also teenagers.
Yeah.
But
Good point.
what I think specifically a strength about Gen Z is that we are like well, because I'm from Wellington, so we've got quite a lot of like we're ready to change the world. We've got the ambitious, bold people who are not afraid to stand up for what is right,
Mm,
which is what I was surrounded by, which really helped me accelerate in the direction I wanted to go. What I'd say about teenagers in general is what I always used to tell people when they ask me how I come up with so many business ideas. And maybe this is not just teenagers, people in general, is people love to point out problems in the world, love to complain. This is a problem. This is a problem. And I would always say, take that thought one step further and consider what could be the solution. That's what I always say to people. Like, we point out problems, there's problems. We're really good at identifying problems. And in entrepreneurship, you do need it. That's exactly what you need. Like, this is something that could be done a little bit more efficient. This is something that could be a little bit better. But it's adjusting that mind frame from this sucks, this is the problem, to and they're being like, hey, like, what's the opportunity in this? And I think so, like as a general teenager thing, we were like, we
mm,
had all these problems. And then Gen Z came along and was like, actually, we don't need to just like settle for the problem. Like we deserve better. We can like strive for better. And I think because I was obviously in Wellington, we were in like the quite like political space where people were like, let's strive for better.
mm,
And that was something that I admired about Gen Z. And I obviously there's a balance between doing it with the right attitude and doing it out of a
mm,
place of love rather than anger.
mm,
But that's kind of what pushed me into this direction was it's just that little mindset switch which I could see in the people around me. What's the problem but what's the solution? And
mm,
that's a thing of strength that Gen Z has, and that is something which also kind of unites them. We like
mm.
together strive for better, and so that sense of kind of like community and activism was once again something I saw a lot and was a strength because it was like we're all in it. So like on a personal level, we were like we deserve more, and then together we were like let's action it so that we can deserve more.
Oh,
Yeah.
I love that aspect of community, action and activism together. That's
Mm,
powerful. Hey, what
yeah.
what are some of the your concerns or some of the weaknesses that you're seeing with your generation?
I don't know. I think there's a big separation in the generations, and I've talked quite a lot about like intergenerational change.
Yeah.
And this is something I think about a lot is the fact that I think as a country we need to be making bigger, more bold investments for that will take longer to see the results of, like the upfront investment for the long-term gain. And
Mm,
I think as a nation, we're not really doing that because we're not talking to the generations which currently are. So we're not thinking about the generations to come really.
Mm,
And so I think an issue is that Gen Z feels potentially targeted by the older generations. Hence, we feel like we're fighting them. And so
mm,
we're not, there's no intergenerational collaboration and
mm.
innovation conversations. They're just not happening as easily as they could and should be,
Right.
I think, which can then brew up anger
Mm,
rather than that collaborative, we're in this together, we're looking out for the better of the world, that
mm,
type of mindset is I
mm,
think something that we're and then just that anger thinking that the world or like people are against you can then grow up in other parts of your life.
mm,
Um and then I think also just the fact that feeling like other people don't believe in you or that you don't deserve more makes people start to not strive for more because they
mm,
don't think people want them for more. And then when
mm,
you're not striving for more, you kind of end up like me
mm,
at 15 or 16 once I finished my sport and then I'm like, what am I here for? I'm just kind of pushing through school. I have no big goals. I don't know what I can be. I don't know what the possibilities are for me because I
mm,
don't know how big the world can get because I'm not having that communication about I don't know what the big world's like because I don't talk about
mm.
what the adult world's like. I don't know what careers exist. I just know that to be the smart girl, apparently I have to take sciences and math. And I think that's something which Gen Z can kind of get caught up by because there's not that intergenerational two-way
Mm.
communication. We don't know how big the possibilities are, so we kind of settle for kind of less and not having as much, like not having the ambition, which for me was a huge part of me striving to get my make.
Mm.
What was it? More than making it to go
Yeah.
from just I'm just kind of going through school to actually striving for more.
Wow. I've written down connecting the generations. It
Yeah,
sounds like you found a problem and there needs to be a solution for that because for an
yeah,
entire generation, eh? And
100%.
you know, I'm really excited about this concept and this idea. Now, I mean, we've heard a lot about your journey, the successes you've had so far, and a couple of challenges you've had along the way. Were there any other major challenges you've had or difficulties that you've had over the last couple of years? For someone listening, obviously they might go, "Oh, yep, yep, it's been pretty smooth ride." But
Mm.
yeah, were there any difficulties that or speed bumps that you faced along the way?
Yeah, I mean, life is life's hard, and especially with this business, I felt very out of my depths because it needed to be large scale for it to work and be viable. And I didn't know if I could carry that. I didn't know business. I didn't um like I had a little problem solving entrepreneurship mindset, but I didn't know how to run a business. But what was more scary for me is that I didn't know the industry. I
Mm,
didn't know forestry. I didn't know primary industries. I didn't do science. I dropped all sciences. Oh, I did bio in year 12, but barely. You know, and so I'm here and then I'm trying to talk to these people doing have spent 3 decades in the industry and have their masters. And then I'm like, and then I think with all the challenges, I thought the business was going to quit so many times, like it was just not going to work and it was going to fail. And I felt very alone during that process
mm,
because I working in a team didn't work. I was with my
mm.
two best friends, and we knew it was best for all of us to remain best friends and no longer be business partners. Um, so but I felt quite like alone in that. And I think that's something that founders, startup
Mm,
people, or just anyone in high school where you're trying, or like a Gen Z, young
mm.
adult
Yeah,
people,
yeah.
trying to strive for more because I was the only person in my high school doing that, trying to strive for this kind of niche thing,
Right,
Because
right.
sports people, you've got your teammates, you've got
Mm,
the people you're training with. But this, it felt like I was doing something too niche and people don't understand why I didn't have time to hang out because I was going to a networking event, but I had to go to the networking event to
mm,
advance this business, which I had committed to. And so I struggled for quite a long time with feeling alone in that. And then also feeling like I wasn't specialist enough or smart enough
yeah.
to do the business. Um, but that's when I just had to kind of keep going, like one day at a time, and
Mm,
building the support team around me, and still doing the things I love. Because that's one thing which is really important to
mm,
me because with I did this badly with gymnastics and my productivity scheme was I made that my personality. I made it my identity. Like I was a gymnast and I was this productive girl. But then with business, I had to make sure I didn't become a business girl because if my
mm,
business failed, and as business, it's so uncertain. If my business failed, I couldn't fail with it.
mm.
And so how I overcame that, because like business had really hard times, but I learned to actually like Elisa was still okay because
Yeah.
Elisa is not an Evo Pots. I
Yes.
was still hanging out with my friends, doing things I loved, going to the gym, my cold swims,
Yeah.
dancing. And that's really how, like, the more like, falling in love with myself as myself
Mm,
without all these external things became so crucial because then if my business had uncertainties, I still was okay.
mm.
And then it meant I felt like I still felt alone during like the business side of things, but it wasn't like crippling. And then I
Mm,
slowly found mentors and people in a team for that area of my life.
mm,
And it's still hard being a solo founder, but looking for a co-founder maybe.
mm. Yeah.
No, just looking for some more people to bounce ideas around with. But you know, it just like yeah, 100%. Like building your relationship with yourself
Mm,
outside of whatever thing you're doing, whether it's sports, because sports is great until you get injured.
mm.
What do you do when you're injured? And a lot of athletes really struggle with that. And so that
Yeah.
was a big way I got over that.
Absolutely love it. The disconnection of your identity to what you do well. I think that was a lesson from the sounds of it that you took from the first two major experiences in your life, and
Mm,
I think that's going to serve you really, really well going forward. I want to talk about a couple of more questions, and then we can land this plane.
okay.
I read this article recently in the Herald, and they quoted Stats New Zealand, and it talked about 52,500 New Zealand citizens leaving in that year, ended March 31st, with 39%, almost 40% being age 18 to 30. Now, I've
Hmm.
always known that it's a age-old Kiwi institution to go and OE, overseas
Yeah.
experience. And so a percentage of that is normal, but
Hmm.
40% of young
Yeah.
people are leaving New Zealand and many of them don't return. Do you have any thoughts around that? I mean, obviously you're still here. Who knows what
Yeah.
the future may hold, but what are your thoughts around that?
I actually remember seeing that stat and being like, whoa. And I've just made the move to university, but I've just finished high school. And so we were all having these conversations about what next, what after uni. And I've got a few friends who've made that move to Australia,
Mm,
um, mentors, and I'm like, why? And they're like, it's like the grass is greener, like everything is better in Australia. And it was kind of like, I don't know what's going on, but I I think there's always just going to be an aspect of people don't realize what we have and how beautiful our country is. And I think sometimes it just takes going overseas to realize how
mm,
like appreciative we are of New Zealand. So I had the privilege of going on this business experience with Young Enterprise to Brazil
mm,
and just seeing like the inequalities in life there. It was really eye-opening
mm,
and made me really grateful for New Zealand because I've fallen in love with New Zealand and that's why I'm here to stay. Because
mm,
one thing about my business specifically is that which is one thing I'll comment on about the government thing, is
mm,
that New Zealand in the business space is seen as too small of a market, which is
mm,
why people start in New Zealand and then just jump to Australia or beyond. Um, and one of the main reasons for that is not only because our market is so small, but a result of, because of that, we don't have the infrastructure to process a lot of things. So we're manufacturing overseas, importing back to New Zealand, and then trying to distribute to the small market. And so people for business, especially, like I know people are moving to like other countries just for the lifestyle, but I guess on a more business aspect, people think New Zealand's too small for
mm,
what it's worth. Um, with the costs of
Mm,
things, which I think is such a shame because it's like all this like Kiwi like innovation is
mm,
not entering the New Zealand market really because it's we're producing it overseas and then importing it back in, but also because of that high cost, it's not accessible for all Kiwis, which is why with Anivo pots, I've been very firm that the pots will be produced in New Zealand.
mm.
I said it in my pitch at Nationals. I was like, if I had $1 for every time someone told me to produce my pots overseas, I'd be rich. Probably very rich because the pots would be made ultra cheap and ultra fast.
Yeah.
But that is not something that we value, you know? And I
Mm,
would go on to say that by making our pots in New Zealand, we're lowering our carbon footprint. We're making use of Kiwi innovation and technology
mm,
and our local raw materials,
mm,
but also just like promoting New Zealand like is what we can do. And so it's taken a lot more time. Like I could have had my pots in production and in nurseries
mm.
probably a year ago,
Yeah.
but we're still working on there's one person in New Zealand who we think can make our products and they're just kind of setting up their company so things are all new. But
Mm.
for me it was important because it was about it being New Zealand and it being
Wow.
here because there's something so valuable in
Mm,
it being New Zealand made with New Zealand raw materials. Some
mm,
people they export their raw materials because they want it to be like New Zealand ingredients, so they ship it away
mm,
to
mm.
be New Zealand ingredients and then have to import it back in. But
Mm.
like think about the cost in that, the carbon
Yeah.
footprint in that, and so um I would love to see New Zealand invest more into the infrastructure in New
Mm,
Zealand so that we can process our things here.
mm,
Um, Instead of having to send it away and bring it back because that's I guess one of the biggest problems is that it's not worth it.
mm,
The business it doesn't add up. You can't be profitable, people say, which is why they just make the move to where it's bigger.
mm.
Um,
Yeah. I
and yeah,
absolutely
that's
love
what I'm
this.
seeing.
I absolutely love this, and obviously no one's going to hold you to this, but the fact that you're so firm with making it Kiwi, it's such a rare thing today, and so
Yeah.
good on you, Elisa. Well, just to come to a close, a lighter question. What do you currently do for fun?
Oh my gosh. See, this is good because I was talking about how like I'm like building my identity as me, not in my business. And so this was something I last year got very like obsessed with like doing fun things and I would go on cold swims in the ocean and everything. Can't quite do that here. It's I won't say it's too cold. I just can't drive to the ocean in
Mm,
Christchurch. But I've joined lots of clubs in uni. The
yep.
tramping club we were talking before. I went on the most beautiful, beautiful tramp 2 weekends ago, in Arthur's Pass, and it was the most beautiful view of my whole entire life when we got to the top of the hill. And I was like, "This is what life is about." And we swam in this nice little lake. Um, and so for me, getting out into nature is something that really grounds me, restores me. I love spending time with my friends, and also getting myself into like a really good community group at my church. I love spending
Nice.
time there.
Mm.
Um, I love doing exercise. I just went on Outward Bound and came back from that, so I'm in my like trail running era. So trying to train for a marathon
Oh,
this year, hopefully. And because that's something that's fun. I love pushing myself and growing in that way. I love cooking. I like just like living my life to its fullest,
nice.
adventuring. And I think like that's something that's quite high on my priority list,
Yep.
because as I was saying, academics is not my thing. And here I am studying a degree, which was not what I thought I was going to be doing.
Mm,
So that's, I'm not striving to be the top of my class. I'm
mm,
here to keep my innovative mindset going, use the
yep.
resources I can. But
Yep.
also, it's about like loving me the whole way through. And if that means taking the whole weekend off to go on a tramp
Yep.
and reconnect with nature and remember how small I am in this world,
Mm,
that's what I'm going to do because that's what I know is important to me and it's what's fun to me. And
yep.
like, yeah, that's why I'm here.
That's so cool, Elisa. In closing, I feel like it's really, amazing that you have so many different aspects of who you are, and you remain clear the fact that you're still a teenager. You're a girl from New Zealand starting
Hmm.
her uni journey, and you're allowing yourself to go through this all of these experiences without missing it. Because I think, often people that are on a bullet train to business success tend to go all in and miss out on so many things in life. So well done,
Yeah.
Elisa. And final thing, how do people keep track of your journey? What are your socials? How do they get in touch?
Yes. Well, thank you so much for everything. But Enivo Pots is on Instagram. So it's Enivo Pots, Pots. Don't spell it wrong because you'll find the wrong thing. And then also we've got a website, enivo.co.nz. Otherwise on LinkedIn, Elisa Harley. I haven't quite yet updated it since I've had a quite hectic few months, but that's where I'm kind of posting the amazing opportunities that are coming my way, opportunities for other people that either I've been a part of that I recommend, or just like some thoughts about my story. Because honestly, I'm like just in as much as in awe of what's happening as other people are. I feel like I'm reading somebody else's life when I kind of see the things, and so I love to post about it because I want people to know that that's possible for them too. So
Awesome.
that's where you'll find me.
Awesome. Well, if you're interested, you're a young person, you're a parent, you're a business person, whoever you are, if you're ever interested to track with Elisa, because she is someone to follow, someone to learn from, but also someone that you can contribute towards in terms of her journey as well. So thank you very much, Elisa.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a great day.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave us a rating and review. It really helps us out. In the meantime, you can learn more about us at www.miomo.com, www.miomo.com. Until next time, stay inspired and keep striving to more than make it in life and parenting.